Welcome students to the online NPTEL course Contemporary Architecture and Design. Today we will discuss about the art movement which was there during the modernist era. We have already discussed few of the art movement which was closely linked with the design and architecture movement, for example Art Nouveau, Art Deco and De Stijl or De Stijl during the Bauhaus era, and we have discussed few artists work and the poster designs and which was during that era, and today we will discuss about the other art movement which was not as closely merged with the architecture movement or design movement, but they were also closely linked with the other movements of there were also the movements during the modernist era, and few of the postmodern movement were also linked with this art movement, which we will go discuss later when we talk about the postmodern architectural movement. So this is the time frame of modernist art movement. So we can recognize this is just the pre-modern or just before 1920s, which is against the machine movement, which is Art Nouveau, and then we have Art Deco, which is inspired from Art Nouveau, but more abstract and more geometric. Then we have a purely geometric movement, which is like few Piet Mondrian's and Theo van Doesburg's paintings, which is De Stijl or De Stijl, which is closely linked with Bauhaus. And then we have this Impressionism or Pointillism and Expressionism. Expressionism we have discussed. There is part of Expressionism in architecture as well, and then we have talked about Munch's Cream, and and this is Cubism by Picasso, and today we will start discussing about the modern art movement, and the next class also will continue that. So this is Art Nouveau, where Gustav Klimt and Alfonso Mucha is working, and then we see the whiplash lines, which is very biomorphic in nature, and which goes with the architectural movement as well, where we see the whiplash lines when Victor Horta is designing the Hotel Tassel or Antonio Gaudi's work, and we see a lot of influence of gold in Gustav Klimt's work, which was again linked with the Baroque and Rococo style, which happened before Industrial Revolution, but Art Nouveau kind of got inspiration from that. Now the next phase we see Art Deco, which is within the modern era, which is after 1920s, and Alfonso Muron's work and Tamara de Olympica's work, where we see curvilinear patterns or lines, and then but we see a lot of geometric influence in that, and these shines in the patterns where we see this kind of metallic shines which is there within the painting, and which is also linked with the architecture movement like sunburst pattern, where overemphasis of metallic color and texture was there. Now we have also talked about the De Stijl or De Stijl movement and the Bauhaus movement's painting, which falls under that. So Piet Mondrian's Broadway Boogie Woogie, Theo van Doesburg's work, or Wesley Kandinsky's work in Bauhaus movement, where they're talking about pure geometry and the pure basic colors, which is red, yellow and blue, which are the primary colors, with the achromatic shades of gray, black and white. And here we see the exploration of just eye movement, and not this painting does not convey any meaning, and it's highly abstract and just superimposition of different rectilinear or pure geometric forms, which creates a pattern and in the canvas. So after that we have seen, which is against the reaction of this style or this Stijl movement, which is Expressionism, when the painters started expressing their thought with a metaphorical expression through lines, colors and textures. For example, this painting Scream by Edvard Munch, where we see the color, the flowy lines and patterns, which depicts the expression, which is the scream or phobia, through this painting. And next today we will discuss, so these movements we have not discussed as such, where before that till now what we are talking about it has been discussed earlier. So we'll start with Impressionism. So Impressionism is a style of painting which has a different kind of technique into that. So it's not like the previous paintings where the color was the watercolor was thin, so there's a different technique called impasto, which is implied over here. And if we look at there's thick color patches which creates the painting. So this is Water Lily by Claude Monet, and this is Water Lily with the bridge. Monet has painted many scenes with the water lily, and also there are many other paintings by Monet. So here we see abstraction from the photorealism, though it depicts a particular landscape, so there is no distortion like which we have seen earlier in the Expressionism. So there is a distortion in the shape and proportion, and for example, if we look at the scream, so there was a highly distorted figure, so it's a lot of abstraction there in the proportion and the shape. And before that, there if you look at the style movement, so there's nothing related to the figurative, so it's very far from the figurative expression of the realism. And here we see the bridge looks like a bridge, and the lilies looks like lilies and water, and but there was no distortion, but there is a technique of painting which is different. So the thick colors, so which is called impasto, so you can see the thick color patches which actually creates a texture on the canvas, so it's not flat canvas, so thick color creates an undulation on the, and there's a feeling of tactile texture on the painting. And here as we know that in modernism is about abstraction, so there was very less movement in modernism which talks about the photorealistic depiction, so or the realism. So today we see some hyper realistic painting, but that was not there in the modernism. So the thought was that camera can capture the realistic image better than painting, so they went towards the abstraction. So this abstraction also was there in terms of architecture. So when we look at the Farnsworth House and other high modern buildings, so those buildings were highly abstract, geometric, the use of material and rhythm, rhyme, those things was quite dominating. So also we have this monolithic movement where geometry plays a pivotal role, which is away from the and which also talks about the abstraction in architecture. And also we have seen abstraction in furniture design when we see this Bauhaus movements chair, like Barcelona chair and Le Corbusier's chair, or George Nelson's furniture design. Those are also quite abstract, and geometry was there, was quite overpowering than the earlier pre-modern era's design. So there are other painters like Vincent van Gogh. So here this is the Starry Night, this is Cafe at Night, and this is his self-portrait. Here also we see these kind of same technique, which is impasto, and here there's a shimmery mix and flowiness in the painting in the Starry Night, and also you can see this quite contrasting colors are applied over here. So it's yellow almost towards the orange, and then blue, which is almost at the opposite side of the color wheel, and here we see orange and blue juxtaposed. Again here we see orange and blue, which is opposite to the color wheel, which is contrasting color, highly contrasting color, which gives a shimmery effect, and with the thick color patches, which is impasto, is also giving this shimmery effect, because there's a two opposite direction of the color wheel is there, which is blue and orange, which is mixture of yellow and red. So there's a like this bright vibrant color palette is created. Here also you can see this blue and orange plays a role. So here also you can see this creates like these are like pointed dots of orange on blue. So from there's another sub movement, you can say, as pointillism is here. So George Seurat is in his painting, you can see a lot of points are there of different colors, which creates the painting. So this painting is created from the concept of lot of points can be merged psychologically in our mind when we see them, and holistically we see the picture. So these are nothing but the juxtaposition of different colored points, and sometimes these colors might not have any relation, like orange and blue, and they create together they create a different color palette when we see from far. So these orange dots and blue dots merge into the and merge together and create something a different color. So if you look at this painting closely, I don't have a picture over here, so these points are of different colors, and if you see closely this there will be different colored points, and when you see the picture holistically, then it will appear like a complete meaning of the painting will appear. So another painter, Paul Gauguin, is also within the phase of Impressionism, and there are other painters who are also there. And from Impressionism, there's another later Impressionism. There's New Impressionism. So Van Gogh, Paul Gauguin, and George Seurat is also from a New Impressionism, where they explored more geometric form and a little bit more vibrant colors than the Monet's work. Now from there's another movement, Fauvism, emerged later after Impressionism. So here also you can see different color patches which does not have any relation. So if you look at the painting, this is Madame by Henri Matisse, and here there is no link of these colors, and there are different color patches which creates this painting. And here also in this painting you see different colors which are juxtaposed. And this Fauvism, this etymologically, this French, it came from a French word which means wild based. So this wild kind of brush stroke and vivid color, because of this vivid color and wild brush stroke, this term called Fauvism emerged from that. And this is a derivative of Impressionism and Pointillism, where they started using different color points and different color patches, which we see in Starry Night or in other painters' work. So from there the Fauvism came, where they started using different brush strokes, and these brush strokes are quite visible. The strokes are not merged together in a proper gradient. So there's these brush strokes which we see here are visible brush strokes with different colors, and which are not properly blended, and that is the style of Fauvism. And then sometimes there will be black outlines around the painting, which will create this particular style. So there are other Fauvist painters like André Derain and George Braque. George Braque later moved on to the Cubism, but he started with the Fauvist painting. So here also we can see different colors, where you can see multiple colors are colored patches are added to make the sky. Here also there are different color patches which comes under Fauvism, and also the black border which goes around the shape is also the characteristics feature of Fauvist painting. Now there is another movement called Surrealism. So this Surrealist paintings, if you look at, they have a photorealistic depiction and precision of painting. So if you look at Surrealist painters' work like René Magritte and Salvador Dali and other painters of Surrealist era, so you will see the total scenario is painted in a very photorealistic precision. It's not like Fauvism or Impressionism, where thick brush strokes were left unmerged, and there are multiple points. So here we see a very photorealistic painting, but the concept and then the elements which are not correlatable, and so these are realistic. It has a realistic look, but the total setup is non-realistic or non-sequitur. So this elements, for example, so this is an apple which is floating in front of the face. So this is called Son of Man, where this apple is actually coming from the story of Adam's and Eve's apple, which so everybody is like Adam's son. So that depicts, and this picture depicts that. And here this is Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali. So everything is like fluid, and this fluid curvilinear line which is merging with like a blob and flowing. Is the setup is quite unrealistic, but if you look at the color, the technique of applying the color, which is quite realistic. And if you look at other paintings of Salvador Dali, you can understand that there are many setups where the different kind of creatures, unrealistic creatures are there, or the unrealistic setup is there, and but in totality it looks very realistic in the technique. So Salvador Dali also designed few furnitures, and this is the May West room in Salvador Dali Museum in Spain, which is derived from the Mae West painting which Salvador Dali have painted. So Mae West was an actress, and Salvador Dali painted a portrait of Mae West, which also, if you look at, so this is very metaphorical, and it looks like Mae West's face, the actress's face, but all these elements are talking about interior space. So it's this duality and surrealistic ambience is there. So it talks about a face as well as it's also a interior space. So that unreal and surreal appearance is there, and from there's an installation which is there in Salvador Dali Museum. And this is the sofa, and this is the fireplace, which acts as the lips and the nose of the face. And this is the Bauhaus sofa, which is there from Salvador Dali's, which is inspired from the painting of Mae West. And these are some furnitures which is designed by Salvador Dali. So here in this chair you can see the foots are metaphorically designed as a human lady's feet, and then hands armrest is designed as a hand. And here also there's the depiction of metaphorical depiction of the human body part, which is there in the furniture. So here these furnitures are surreal furniture designed by Salvador Dali. And in the next class we will discuss about the other movements of modernist movements, and we will then start with the postmodern movement.